Hey everybody, Eric Renia here with Philippe J. Fournier for this week's episode of The Numbers. Philippe, it is a oddly warm fall day, although it does seem like cold weather is about to hit central Canada coming soon, so this means it's going to be deep into the fall, and fall means politics. But before we get into that, how are you doing this week?
I'm doing very well. Thank you, Eric, for asking. It's busy time. We have municipal elections in Quebec, in Alberta. We have the Newfoundland election, although that's been a bit quiet. Tons of poll to dissect. It seems like my media contacts have not grown tired of me yet. After the federal election, they keep calling. So that's good news. Lots of work and... So it's good. It's good to see you. How are you, Eric? How's it going for you these days?
It's going perfectly well. The Newfoundland and Labrador election is next week, so I'm hoping that we'll get some new numbers in the next few days. Some last numbers before the actual campaign election takes place on Tuesday. So I'm mostly waiting for that right now. But apart from that, I'm looking at some of these federal polling numbers that we've gotten. And it has been a bit quieter lately. We haven't had this whole rush of polls like it was earlier on in September. But we did get two this week that I think raise an interesting question. All right. We saw a poll from Abacus Data, which has the Conservatives at 41%, the Liberals at 40%, the NDP at 7%. We've seen this kind of back and forth with Abacus with the two parties around 40%.
Yep.
And now we also see from Nanos Research. So the Nanos is the 4-week rolling poll, and it has 39% for the Liberals, 38% for the Conservatives, and 12% for the NDP, or 11.5%. So the question, I guess, now is, are we going to be in a new normal where every single poll is going to have a gap of 1, 2, 3 points for one of the parties, give or take, one ahead, one behind, and this is where we are?
It's possible. The new normal is setting in. It's interesting how the main disagreements right now with federal polls is where the NDP stands. Abacus has 7, Nanos has 12. It's kind of hard to reconciliate. You put a line in the middle maybe, but that's still a big gap for a party that's in high single digits. But this new normal is interesting because we talked about this post SNC-Lavalin in 2019. And aside from this first COVID summer in 2020 where the Liberals enjoy a huge bump, we had like 3.5 years of the Liberals and the Conservatives basically just being tied between 2-3 points of each other, oscillating, and we were over-analyzing noise because that's what we do. It's possible that we enter this new era where that still is the case, but instead of being at 31%, they're both at 40%. As long as the NDP doesn't recover, that may be what we see. But Eric, about the Nanos tracker, and again, we know it lags because of the very nature of it. But if you look at the past 4-week sample, the Liberals had a double-digit lead, and now it's a 1-point lead, so a statistical tie, which means that the latter half of this sample that we got today, the Conservatives are leading. So that's going to be interesting to see as we head into the fall, the real fall. Because again, one of the storylines of this fall is Pierre Poilievre auditioning to keep his job. And I think those polls could be very favorable to him.
But what is still remarkable in that Nanos poll, because as you said, we are seeing the numbers tighten up, which does suggest that next week we can probably expect that the Conservatives will be ahead. Not necessarily the case. It depends on the week being dropped and all this kind of stuff. But this is a 1-point gap between the two parties, Liberals and the Conservatives, but still a 20-point gap between Mark Carney and Pierre Poilievre on preferred prime minister. So we're still seeing that there is this disconnect between voting intentions and leadership numbers. That is a kind of a bizarre set of figures, right? And we've seen this in other polls, not as dramatic as we've seen from Nanos, but when there is the question of who do you prefer to be prime minister, you still usually see in other surveys when they include that question, a bigger gap between Carney and Poilievre than we do between the Liberals and the Conservatives. We had talked last week about whether Carney was boosting the Liberals and Pierre Poilievre was maybe dragging the Conservatives. But I'm not even sure if that is actually happening. It almost seems like the electorate is a bit polarized between the Liberals and the Conservatives, as they were in the last election, around, as you said, that 40% mark. And it doesn't really matter that Carney is more popular than the Liberals because he's probably getting some of that popularity from New Democrats and Bloc voters who aren't going to vote for the Liberals. And it doesn't really matter that Pierre Poilievre is less popular than the Conservatives because there's that chunk of the electorate that is going to vote Conservative because that is the party that they believe in the most and because they don't like the other options. So it does bring us to this odd position where we could be in a very close race if there was an election held today, even if the leadership numbers don't quite line up with that. And that is not something we usually see.
No, it's rarely. But what you just said about how it doesn't seem to matter for the horse race. Well, let's say that Mr. Carney in the coming months loses maybe 10 points as preferred PM. He would still be leading, but losing that 10 points would mean that many Canadians say, okay, this hasn't worked. This was a mistake, or maybe the buyer's remorse is starting to settle in. We don't see that right now. But I guess that's what it would mean. And if we see Mr. Carney getting much closer to Poilievre in the preferred PM, it would surely have a movement in voting intentions. You would think that the Bloc would be up, the NDP would recover, maybe some of those centrist blue Tories or red grits or whatever. No, what is it again? It's red Tories and blue grits. Sorry, but maybe they're parking their vote elsewhere. It would have an effect. Clearly, here Mr. Carney is saving the Liberals from a big gap in the polls, I think. But as for Mr. Poilievre, the numbers, the gap between his personal numbers and his own party, is much closer than it used to be. Like when we talk about the 29% that Mr. Poilievre gets in the nanos, well, that's kind of close to where the Conservatives are before undecideds. He's not pulling necessarily the Conservatives up, but he's keeping that base intact. And I think that's still a huge achievement because we know that the Conservatives, they had a history recently of booting leaders they don't like, right? So,
yeah, it does seem like Poilievre is safe enough. We'll see how things continue over the next few months in terms of his own numbers. But if he does remain in a competitive race with the Liberals, or even ahead in a few polls by the time we get to January, I don't think there's any doubt that he would pass his leadership review pretty handily. But I do wonder what kind of dynamic this causes in the House in terms of that jockeying for the budget vote that's going to come later this year. Mm-hmm. There's very few people who will suggest that we're going to get an election that one of the parties will, three of the parties will get every single person to show up and vote against the government and bring us into a campaign. You can imagine that if the Conservatives are still tied with Mark Carney and the Liberals, that they might feel a little bit more emboldened to go into a campaign. I'm not convinced that the Liberals are really on a war footing when it comes to an election. You don't really see a lot of indications of that. They're not running ads, for example. Things like that. They're not. We don't really know who would run a campaign. For example, if one suddenly broke out, we don't really know how prepared the Liberals are for an election. I'm very curious to see the fundraising data that we'll get at the end of October, which will show how much money the parties raised during the summer. So after the election, the Liberals had closed the gap earlier on in the year. Will they continue to do that, or will it be a sign that maybe they're letting that kind of lapse and the Conservatives will still be far ahead? But with this polarized race between the Liberals and the Conservatives, that's usually bad news for the New Democrats too, right?
Usually, yeah.
Because a lot of their voters did go over to Carney and the Liberals to block Pierre Poilievre. If it's still a competitive race and he still could become prime minister, that could depress the NDP vote and keep them down into the single digits.
I really wonder about that. And again, that's why I meant when I pointed out that Nanos has had the NDP in double digits all summer. So, and it's not the case from other pollsters. So I'm not saying it's biased or it's wrong. It's part of the landscape. But there's a huge difference if we have a snap election and the NDP is at 12 or 13 or at 6 or 7. There's a huge difference. I know Conservatives have gained on NDP ground, and we talked about the London Fanshawe, for instance, that was won by the Conservatives, and other seats in the rural areas of this country. But you have to think if the NDP is in double digits, it has to hurt the Liberals, right? Again, the Liberals won 20 seats in British Columbia, more than anywhere, more than any time before. If the NDP goes up, you would think they would go up in Vancouver and Vancouver area, Vancouver Island, where the Liberals won seats, a rare achievement. So I don't know. Do you want to go into that leadership race for the NDP? Is that a segue to talk about this? Because it matters a whole lot, even though the party has, I don't want to say marginal support. That's too strong a word, but it's still low. I mean, I have the NDP at 8% right now on my average. I don't know what you have, but it's not good. It's not a good result right now for the NDP.
Well, there's two things that you said there that I think are worth kind of highlighting when it comes to that NDP leadership race. British Columbia, and the kind of voters that the Conservatives took from the New Democrats in the last election, because one of the new candidates in the race, one of those approved by the NDP, there's, we hear some now and then of other candidates trying to get in and this kind of thing, but if you go to the NDP's leadership website, there's only three: Heather McPherson, Edmonton Strathcona MP Avi Lewis, and Rob Ashton. Rob Ashton is from the Labour side. He is, if I'm not mistaken, he's like a dock worker, or at least he's the union leader of the dock workers out in Vancouver. So he's BC based, and he comes from that more working class labor side of things, which I don't know if he has a shot of winning this, but it is an interesting aspect that we do see this other kind of candidacy in the NDP leadership race, the kind that they have, that kind of represents the voters that they've lost over the last little while.
Oh yeah. Absolutely.
You have Avi Lewis that is not really going for those kinds of voters in the same explicit way. It's more of the, it seems more of the kind of progressive urban kind of voter. You have Heather McPherson, who seems to be going for more of the, I don't know how to say it, but like the moderate establishment New Democrat in Western Canada, for example. And then you have Rob Ashton is looking more for that blue collar labor vote. I don't know which coalition ends up winning this, because it'll probably be a combination of the two. But it is an interesting aspect for the NDP if they went in that direction. I just don't know how successful it would be in an election campaign, but it's the kind of candidacy that could make the Conservatives actually be a little bit more worried than the other two.
Yeah, that's fair. Well, if they are successful, yeah, that's fair. Are we going to get an NDP leadership candidate east of Alberta? Because three Westerners, I think that's interesting. That's really interesting. Like, if the NDP, again, I mean, they won't say that officially, but if they don't try to win power, but just try to grow back their base, I mean, BC is the first place to look at, right? Mm-hmm. I don't think Alberta is a very fertile ground, but they had a second seat. It was Griesbach. It was Griesbach that they lost in this election. Northern Ontario would be to watch. They've tried to win Toronto seats since Jack Layton passed, and they haven't been able to. So maybe the thought here is like, okay, this is not the low-hanging fruit anymore, the urban voters, right? Maybe we should go back to our roots. It's shaping up to be far more interesting than I anticipated last summer. But Rob Ashton, I think, that's going to shuffle the deck for sure. I do not know where this is going. And unfortunately, I say this because, again, we're called the numbers. We're probably not going to get a lot of polling on this. And the polls we do get will be small samples, very uncertain. If you ask the average Canadian, what do you think of Rob Ashton? They probably say who, and that's okay. I mean, he comes from outside politics, but
unrelated to the Manitoba Ashtons, we should say.
Oh, yeah.
This will be the third leadership race in a row with an Ashton on the ballot, but not from the same family. We will eventually get some. We'll get that fundraising data that we'll get at the end of October will include September fundraising. So we will get an early indication of who is raising the most money. Then we'll get another set of numbers at the end of January. That will be really right in the midst of the leadership race. We'll have a bit of a better idea of that fundraising aspect. And in the past, we've seen just how much fundraising, by far the best predictor of a leadership race outcome. So that'll be something to watch there. There's one last thing I wanted to touch on here in this kind of federal section of the podcast.
Yeah.
So yesterday was announced. And I'd like to see if you have any thoughts about this. There's two aspects of this. Yesterday it was announced that the budget season, federal budget season, is now going to move to the fall.
Yeah.
That from now on, we're going to have our budgets in the fall rather than in the spring, which is like a lot of other countries do. And there's actually a lot of good reasons to do it. Because it means that everything would be in place by the end of the fiscal year, so things are in place before the fiscal year begins. Because we've had in the past where a budget that's introduced in April or May, the fiscal year has already begun. It's not clear whether things apply for your tax year and all this kind of stuff. So it could be a bit complicated. But there's two things about this. One is
you have this little smile here. Like what do you have in mind?
Well, one question I have is, what does this mean for the fixed election dates in the fall?
Well, that your budget that you want to table becomes your platform for the election.
But think about this, all right? In an election year,
yeah,
a fixed election year, the House rises in June, doesn't come back. We go to the polls in the writ drops in September. The election's in October.
Yeah,
the third week of October. The new government is usually sworn in 2 or 3 weeks later. So now we're in November.
Yeah.
This new government is supposed to introduce a budget before the holidays within a few weeks.
That's right.
It makes it sound like we in an election year we might not end up getting a budget because it would have to be kind of rushed. If it's a new government, are they going to write a new budget in a few weeks? I just find this as an interesting development that maybe makes sense for running the finances. Does it make sense for our election cycle, our election calendar? And I'm not sure if there's been any thought given to that.
Well, the fall session ends in mid-December.
Yeah.
So and officially fall, the fall solstice is December 21st. So they would have time, and I guess if a party wins the election, you would think they would be prepared. They would have prepared. Maybe this is a new development that know that if you're elected, 6 weeks later you have to put a budget.
3 to 4 weeks to draw up a budget is not a long time.
No, it's not a long time.
I don't know.
No.
Then there's the other aspect, though, that this brings up.
Yeah.
If I had asked you, okay, what are the odds that the government falls on the fall budget? You probably would have given me, what would be your number?
10%.
10%.
What would you say?
If I had said, well, yeah, that makes sense to me.
Okay.
I think I don't think it's likely. But what if I said, well, what's the odds that the budget falls on a spring? The government falls on a spring budget?
Higher than
Higher.
10%. Yeah.
But now we're not going to have a spring budget. So the next huge confidence motion. Now there will be the spring economic update. So maybe there could be a confidence motion attached to that. But it now means that our kind of focal point of whether governments are going to survive will move to the fall. So if the Liberals pass their budget in November, does that mean that we can kind of expect that they'll survive for another year rather than only 6 months?
Oh man, I haven't looked that up. There are tons of precedent that we could look up to. Like, is the budget really the thing that makes or breaks the minority government? I know it was the case in '79 with Joe Clark. It was in the fall. Mm-hmm. How did Paul Martin fall? It was not a budget, was it? It was also in the fall. Jack Layton and Stephen Harper decided. I don't remember the exact concept.
It was
a budget, but it wasn't.
Or
in the
was
fall.
it a confidence motion? Oh, I can't remember.
That's the thing. Confidence motion can happen anytime. So, but I agree. The big one is the budget. I would kind of think that the new spring economic update, fiscal update, sorry, is that come attached with the confidence motion? Not necessarily, right?
I just looked it up. 2000, the Martin government defeated on a motion of no confidence, not on a budget. So there you go.
Yeah, the election was in January, so I guess it was late November when it fell, right? So, okay.
Yeah, so there will always be opportunities,
question.
But it's just because if you don't have new spending in an economic statement, then there wouldn't be a confidence motion. Anyway, it's just a little thing, right? Because I think for a lot of people, most people would not even care or notice this, but for a lot of the people who would think this is a big deal, it would be primarily about how it changes the funding cycle and looking at things like this. But of course, for me, I go to elections. How is this going to impact?
Absolutely, and that's a good reflex. I the only thing I would say, and I'm not an expert, so I won't pretend to be one, but I was Radio-Canada yesterday talking with people who know far more about this than I. And they basically said provinces will be very happy because they do their budgets in the spring. And so they will know in advance all the transfers and all the money involved in the federal budget, which was not always the case.
Yeah.
So you're right. I didn't think of this. I didn't think of this topic, but third Monday of October. Will we change our fixed election date? Well, fixed. We know it's still whenever the government wants.
Quote unquote fixed.
Fixed. Yeah, fixed. Mm-hmm. Suggestion. Yeah, it's very
suggested. Let's move to the actual election that is scheduled, Newfoundland and Labrador. We still don't have much to talk about. I found this a bit bizarre. I will not complain about the release of polls in any context. Mm-hmm. But we had chatted before about Narrative Research, which was the Atlantic Canadian pollster, put out quarterly results every quarter, and they've done it for years and years and years.
Yeah.
Now, no one requires them to do this. They do this for free, so, it was like a public service. But over the last little while, they've not done that anymore. They've put out sometimes government satisfaction numbers, but they haven't put out voting intentions numbers for several quarters. Then this time in Newfoundland and Labrador, they had their poll that they normally do in August, and they had put out the satisfaction numbers about 2 weeks later. And then last week, they put out their voting intentions numbers.
They did, yeah.
In the middle of the campaign, but the poll was conducted from August 7th to August 29th.
Yeah.
It was already nearly 2 months old, or parts of it, when it was released. So I don't know. Is it a beggars can't be choosers kind of situation? How do we look at this?
It is a beggars can't be choosers. So many things to say about this. And of course, Narrative is a private company. They do whatever they want. We understand that polling, especially, they explained it on their report, that you cannot really do an online poll because online panels for Newfoundland are too small or not representative. They have too many urban voters and not enough rural voters. So if you do an online poll in Newfoundland and Labrador, it's probably going to be skewed or will need a lot of waiting, and that's risky. So they did live callers, and live callers is extremely expensive. I was told by a pollster that 1,000 people in Canada with live callers, considering that the response rates, it's somewhere between 5 and 12% if you're lucky, that's $15,000. And you're a business, you still want to make a profit out of this. Who's going to pay for that, right? So Narrative says in his report it has private clients. It will only give their numbers to private clients. That's fair. But to release very old numbers in the middle of the election is still a choice, right? But let's talk about the numbers, Eric, because I want to know what you think. 59% for the Liberals, for the John Hogan, the new leader of the Liberals. 31% for the PCs. And 9% for the NDP. This is a rout. Yep. If we see that in a ballot box next week in Newfoundland and Labrador, that is a blowout victory for the Liberals. It seems strange, isn't it? I'm not casting a shadow or doubt on that poll, but that seems way too high. The sample size was 350, so that's a huge margin of error, obviously. But if the Liberals do not win the election and we have this poll, we have two conclusions, right? Either the poll was completely wrong, or the Liberals held the worst campaign in many years, and I don't see that really from the news.
No, I mean, the worst you could say about the campaign is that it's not too exciting. Like there haven't been big gaffes or anything like that. There is going to be a debate on Wednesday night, so that could change things up. And I am told that we probably will get at least a poll before election day. So we should get. I don't know if it'll be from Narrative, but anyway, expect some numbers. But I mean, we can look at it from the perspective of going into the campaign. The Liberals were the favorites, right? Yep. They, and which I think was expected to be the case. I mean, Mark Carney's Liberals had just won the vote in Newfoundland and Labrador. And we had seen good approval rating numbers for John Hogan from the Angus Reid Institute, for example. We've seen good satisfaction numbers from Narrative. But yeah, is it actually a 20 a 28-point lead. The margin of error on the decided voters is about 5 or 6 points, right? So you could end up being in a closer to the low 50s and high 30s. So it's not, such a landslide. But
Yeah.
I'm really looking forward to seeing the next set of numbers before Election Day, because there is an impact here, right? The fact that this was a pre-election poll that was published 2 weeks into the election, it does kind of change the feeling, right? Because before the poll came out, I kind of had the feeling, based on what I'd seen from people discussing the election, that it could be a pretty close one.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden it's like, oh, wait, no, it's actually not a close election at all. And you could almost see the change of the discussion that in terms of how this race was unfolding.
Oh, is that so? Really, huh?
I think so, at least a little bit. And so I'm really hoping that we'll get some more numbers that'll give us a better indication. Because if we do see other numbers that have a 20-point lead for the Liberals, everyone's like, all right, fine.
Yeah.
They were always in the lead, and that's that. But if we do see some polling that comes out next few days that has a 5-point gap between the two parties or a neck-and-neck race, then it raises some questions about, well, what was the value of putting out this kind of poll if it wasn't a good reflection of where things were anymore? I just don't understand, as you said, all due respect to narrative, they can do whatever they want.
Of course.
Probably should have put it out at the beginning of the campaign, not in the middle of it, considering the date. And that's, I just don't know why, I just don't think it was the right time to put it out. I'll just put it that way.
But the Conservatives have an out here. Says, okay, well, the Liberals were in the lead, but we have all the momentum. So that's the thing.
Sure.
Is that
Well, anybody can say anything.
Exactly, right? But also narrative. In the federal election, they did release an Atlantic poll. They had at one point, they had the Carney Liberals close to 70% in Newfoundland. That was 15 points off. So I know the campaign changed, right? But we didn't see radical movement during the campaign. I mean, it tightened up a little bit near the end, but not by 15 points. So we're gonna see. I track and I rate posters and narrative. Again, I'm very grateful to have these numbers occasionally, but it's not like they came close to election results in the past. So we'll see. But It's curious how I was not paying attention at all to Newfoundland except for this podcast, right? And with this poll, I was like, oh, okay. So either the poll is right, or there was either the poll was wrong, or there's a momentum shift. But we'll see. Okay, so do you have a model for Newfoundland and Labrador? Because I have one, but officiously, is that a word? Pas officiellement. Because I don't. It's the data is too sparse. It's not scientific. It goes with vibes. I had the Liberals slightly favorite, maybe win a minority, depending on independents and third parties, but not the NDP. So, what do
I
you?
don't have one. I don't have one running. I have one just to plug in poll results for. And for this one, I think I got 29 Liberal seats out of
40.
Of 40, yeah,
That's a big one.
with one NDP. And you got to kind of assume those independents who got 60% of the vote in one case and 70% in the other, probably going to get reelected.
Yeah.
And that was another thing. This poll didn't have any results for independents or other parties, which is unfortunate. So keep an eye on those last numbers. Our next episode will be up on Election Day.
Yep.
So we'll probably try not to make too much of a fool of ourselves in terms of prognosticating what's about to happen. But that'll be something to watch. And that Election Day is on October 14th. Okay. British Columbia.
Yeah.
I do want to touch on this because, there's lots of stuff happening in BC.
Jesus.
The reporting that I saw this morning was that there was a confidence vote that was supposed to happen in the BC Conservative Caucus, and the
Among
allies
caucus
for
members.
John Rustad
Yeah.
blocked the vote from happening at the caucus. Always a good sign when you just try to block that kind of vote from happening entirely. He's lost a couple MLAs to one BC. He's kicked out a couple others. His numbers are not that good. No. Personally, the party's numbers are okay.
Yeah.
But it just seems like David Eby is blessed by his opposition.
Yeah, we'll have to watch what happens with the Greens, however, because you would think the Greens would attract some disappointed NDPers, but when you see your party doing okay, so 2 polls from British Columbia last week, we had Research Co, the BC-based pollster, and we had Cardinal Research. NDP at 44 and 43 in those 2 polls. Conservatives at 38 and 41. So, an advantage for the NDP. But it's the approval numbers that really caught my eye, Eric. I mean, David Eby, leader of the NDP, premier of the province, he has a plus 60 net approval according to Research Co. And his opponent, Mr. Rostad, has a minus 11. Now, that's a big gap. It's similar to the gap we're seeing between Carney and Poilievre at the federal level, to be fair. But it's still surprising to me that the Conservatives are ready to throw Rostad out after almost winning last year. It's been 1 year. But what do you make of those latest numbers in BC? Like, does that change how you view the next election in BC?
I still think that Rostad is he became leader by default. Like, if this leadership race had happened when the party was at 40% in the polls, I don't think he would have won it.
Yeah, it's possible, huh? Yeah.
He was an MLA who had been booted out of the BC Liberals at the time,
right. Yeah.
And the Conservatives were a nothing party, and they said, "Here, why don't you take the leadership?" And he said, "Sure." Now, to his credit, he did help build the party into a party that was in contention for government, but he's not a particularly dynamic figure, and as you can see from these numbers, he's not very popular. One of the differences, you said how you see these leadership differences between Carney and Poilievre, and you see this here between Eby and Rostad. I would say that what you see that's a bit different is that the disapprovals for Rostad tend to be a lot higher in more polls. We do see those Angus Reid Institute polls where Pierre Poilievre's numbers are quite poor, but not in all. In Abacus, it's a bit of an even race in terms of, well, even. He's roughly treading water in terms of negative versus positive.
Yeah.
But Rostad here is 53% unfavorable according to Cardinal, 48% according to Research Co. And in the Research Co poll, you also see that there's a pretty low ceiling for the Conservatives, the amount of people who consider voting for them. And research found that there's a 16-point gap between David Eby and John Rostad on preferred premier.
That's big.
That's pretty big. And so you do get the impression that if the Conservatives replaced Rostad with someone who was more appealing, that the Conservatives would be much more popular. Now, would they be able to overtake the NDP? I don't know, because Eby's numbers aren't that bad, or they're actually quite good. But it does seem like this is a party that was always going to... Well, which one is it? Centrifugal or centripetal that tears it apart from the outside?
Centrifugal, yeah.
Yeah. It just seemed like this party was destined for that, because it came together. It was a shotgun wedding, almost literally, with disparate elements of the party, and the ones that were generally further to the right, because the BC Liberal Old Coalition tended to try to keep things as center-right as possible, kind of run the show here. And so this party just does not feel like it is viable in its current form. It needs to kind of be reset with another election and a new leader. That's kind of where I see this party being, because it still is. Yeah. It still is a little bit of a Frankenstein. And it needs to kind of become a real boy. I guess, I don't know.
It's trying to be big tent. It's just that there's people inside of it that don't want the big tent.
They don't want some of those people in the tent. Yeah,
exactly. Which is always a problem. But okay, so the polls we had, they did poll the newer parties, the newer, smaller parties. So there's Centre BC, which take red as a color. So, it's kind of liberals, right? And there's a 1BC. Research Co had 3% for Centre BC, 1% for 1BC. And Cardinal had 4% for 1BC. Now, the 1BC is staunchly conservative. So you would think that these voters come from the Conservatives, even though there's not that many of them. There's not that much splintering in public opinion right now. At least not as much as we see with an internal party. So we're going to have to follow this because if, let's say, we know how tight this parliament is, right? The NDP has the exact number for a majority at the Victoria legislature. So if let's spring or next summer, let's say we get British Columbia polls that have those smaller parties at 6-7% instead of 1 or 2, does David Eby says let's go, let's call a snap election. It's not implausible, right? Because right now even though the opposition in front of him is splintering, his majority is fragile. So we may get a few elections next year, my friend. Alberta, Quebec, BC, why not? Federal, maybe? It's
federal too? Ooh. Boy. It's supposed to be a quiet year aside from Quebec. But
maybe not. Maybe not.
Speaking of Quebec, why don't we just quick word on the new Léger poll? I say quick because it doesn't really have anything all that different from what we've seen before. But what did the numbers show?
So we only had partial data from Léger. Usually they have sovereignty numbers, satisfaction numbers, best premier numbers. We only had the voting intentions. And it looks like just a fluctuation. So 36% for the Parti Québécois in first place, alone in first place among the Francophone majority. 25% for the Liberals, 16% for the CAQ, which right now is their best poll. It's still pretty bad. 15% for the Conservatives, so it looks like a regression to the mean because Léger had the Quebec Conservatives a bit low in the previous poll. And 6% for QS, which for Quebec Solidaire, which for me, I think it's kind of the big story here. That's less than half what the party had in the general election. Let's remember, Quebec Solidaire finished second in popular vote in 2022. And now we have to wonder what's going to be left at Quebec Solidaire. In Montreal, the Pablo Rodriguez Liberals appear to be doing well. It's 3 polls in a row with, in Greater Montreal, the Liberals are in front. So you would think they're very strong on the island and in Laval. The CQ far behind in the regions, far behind in Quebec City, and still in trouble after all these promises from Legault. But we'll see. We'll see where it goes. Do you have any thoughts on this poll, Eric?
Well, just the only one is that we had talked when the Palace Data poll came out and the CQ was at 11, whether we were going to start seeing them into the single digits. I think this just kind of shows that, at least for the time being, the CQ has hit its floor. Is it 16 or is it 11? Doesn't really matter that much. It's somewhere in the mid to low teens. And that momentum, that trend, at least for now, has halted, which it's still a bad place to be, but things could even be worse. So I think that was my note there, that the CQ is not completely collapsing. It's just still it's on life support, but
things could be worse. There you go.
Yes,
that's a slogan.
Hey, that's a mantra you should have every day when you wake up.
There you go. That's all I have to say. We should have the rest of the data next week, so we'll see.
And one quick word as well on the Miramichi West by-election in New Brunswick. This was a provincial by-election. The PCs were able to win it, 57% of the vote, which is more or less where they were in the 2024 provincial election. The Liberals jumped up 5 points to 39%. The Greens dropped 2 to 2%. Really not a very surprising result or anything like that. Nothing really shocking. The Liberals, improving their vote, but still well behind. Turnout was 53%, which
that's good. That's really good.
People love by-elections this year. Maybe they're listening to the podcast and they're understanding our enthusiasm for them.
It's because
and now they're going out to vote. So Kevin Russell of the PCs wins. I'm not sure if you have any other comments on this by-election, but just wanted to mark it.
Just quickly, I think we talked about it when it was launched, and we said the PCs, even though they're not polling well right now, should really hold on to this, and they did. So steady as she goes.
All right, we will move over to the quiz. You said you had one, and you said that ChatGPT was
useless.
Useless.
So, I just want to tell our viewers and listeners that the quiz that I write for Eric, they're always mine, right? I never asked ChatGPT to just write me a quiz. I've tried it just for fun, and it's garbage. It's utter garbage, right? It's full of mistakes and inaccuracies. So I write my own, and just for fun, I put the quiz to ChatGPT, and he had 50% right. So it's garbage. Anyway, so here's the format. It's very simple.
My job at least, is not in danger yet.
Well, you have to have more than 50% on this quiz. So so gold. Okay, so I have 4 politicians here. I will tell you the name of the politician, unlike previous weeks, and give you 3 statements about these politicians, and one of those 3 is false.
False,
or partially false, but partially false, partially true means false. And so you have to spot it. And so I think it's not that hard, but you never know. I don't want to put pressure on you. So it's very simple. Gold is 4 out of 4. You have to go perfect to win gold. Silver is 3. And if you have 2, it's kind of bronze, but you tied ChatGPT, so I would say it's a mix of bronze and shame. Okay?
Yeah.
So
Shameful bronze.
Here we go, Eric. The first politician is Lester B. Pearson. My 3 statements. Number 1. As Canada's ambassador to the United States, Pearson was part of the Canadian delegation at the founding of the United Nations in 1945. Number 2. In the 1957 Liberal Leadership Convention, Pearson won the leadership on the first ballot, a razor-thin victory over Paul Martin Sr. And number 3. Pearson's minority government passed the Canada Pension Plan after negotiation with all provinces, although Quebec opted out to create its own version. One of these 3 statements is false.
These all sound pretty plausible.
Thank you.
I'm having some trouble with them. I do think that he did win on the first ballot in 57. I don't think that was a long drawn-out race, I think. But was it in 58, actually? I think it was in 1958, so I wonder if you're trying to trick me.
Well, that would be if I have a date wrong, that would be...
That does not seem to be the folks. That does not seem to be what he... I don't think he was ambassador to the United States, though. I don't think he was. I think he had a different role. Or was he U.S. ambassador? Oh, man. I don't know. I think he wasn't U.S. ambassador. So I think I'm going to do that.
Okay. He was U.S. ambassador.
He was?
That's why he was, yes. Part of the Canadian delegation at the founding of the United Nations.
I knew that, but I didn't think it was as a U.S. ambassador. Yeah. Okay.
Well, according to what I wrote, you're making me doubt. Maybe people are screaming at their headphones right now, but this is what I read.
We'll do some fact-checking after.
In 1957, the Leadership Convention, Pearson won the leadership on the first ballot, but it was really not a razor-thin victory. He crushed Paul Martin Sr. 78-22. So that was the false statement. Okay. Okay, maybe I went a little too hard. You'll see. Okay.
No, that's fine. Right. That's fine. Right. That's fine.
You have to win. You have to save silver, my friend.
Yep.
The second politician, we're gonna have to fact check that. I checked the Canadian Encyclopedia, and
I'm sure that's right. I'm just surprised.
My second politician is Kim Campbell. 3 statements. Number 1. Before entering federal politics, Campbell served as British Columbia's Minister of Justice to Social Credit Premier Bill Vander Zalm. Number 2. She was the first woman in Canadian history to serve as both Minister of Justice and Attorney General of Canada. And number 3. She later served as Canada's Consul General in Los Angeles, a post she was appointed to by Prime Minister Jean Chrétien.
Okay, that's true. The first thing is true. She was Minister of Justice in the SOCRED government. So maybe she wasn't the first woman to have that title. So that'll be my guess.
Oh man, I'm gonna have to check that.
Am I wrong again?
Yes, you're wrong again. Sorry. Yeah. She was a backbencher in the social credit in BC, and she didn't serve any cabinet post. So
is that right?
That's what I read. We're gonna have to fact check this, but Yeah. So she was the first woman to serve Minister of Justice and Attorney General.
Oh.
It's a long list, right?
Oh, I think
And
I'm mixing up. I think she was a minister for Mulroney, and I'm mixing that up.
She was, absolutely. Yeah, sorry.
Okay.
Ooh.
What? Here, wait. Just as a
Okay.
to try to save myself a little bit.
Right.
In the leadership race for the Socreds, I think for Bill Vander Zalm in 86 or whatever it was, Kim Campbell finished last out of like 12 candidates. Anyway.
Oof, that's tough.
I'm going to say that's my little factoid to try to...
Was it her first leadership race, Eric?
Oh, stop it. Yes?
No, it wasn't. She had tried the previous one and she lost too. So she did a lot. Sometimes you have to do a lot of losing before you win, and then you lose again. But anyway.
All right. Well, it sounds like I'm on track for shame. Let's continue.
Number 3 is Brian Mulroney. Number 1. Before entering politics as an elected official, Mulroney was president of the Iron Ore Company of Canada, a post he held until just before winning the PC leadership in '83. Number 2. In 1989, Mulroney's government announced the introduction of the goods and service tax to replace the hidden 13.5% manufacturer's sales tax. And although the government argued the GST was not a tax increase but a tax shift, its visibility made it extremely unpopular. And number 3. In the 1988 Canadian election, Mulroney's Progressive Conservatives were re-elected with a majority of seats, but won the popular vote in only 2 provinces, namely Alberta and Quebec, and lost all their seats in the territories.
These are tough because they're all very close to being true. But you said the GST was 13%?
No, the MST, the manufacturer's sales tax. The GST was supposed to replace this tax, and the GST at first was 9% when I read.
Okay. So, yeah, okay, that's true unless the date's different. And he was head of the iron, so maybe he won the popular vote in more provinces in 1988. I mean, they got 43% of the vote. I mean, most of it they must have won at least one other province. I'll say the last one is false.
In 1988 Canadian election, the PCs won the popular vote in Alberta, Quebec, and barely in Manitoba.
Oof,
so you got this right. You got this right.
Goodness.
It's still surprising though, right? They lost the popular vote in Ontario, in BC, in all the Maritimes. So anyway, interesting. So you got that right. Can you save yourself? And my last one is John Diefenbaker.
Okay.
You know John Diefenbaker.
Sure.
No, I'm not just of him. You know a lot about him, right?
Mm-hmm.
So, okay. Number 1. Diefenbaker's government granted the right to vote in federal elections to all Indigenous people with status without requiring them to renounce their treaty rights. Number 2. Diefenbaker appointed the first women federal cabinet minister in Canadian history, as well as the first Indigenous member of the Senate. And number 3, he is still to this day the only prime minister who represented a riding in Saskatchewan during his prime ministership, namely Prince Albert.
All right. I'm pretty sure that the last one's false because I think Mackenzie King also represented Prince Albert. So that's going to be my guess.
You sure?
Yeah.
And Mackenzie King was also prime minister and MP of Prince Albert. So that's...
You make me doubt things. Oh.
It's how you finish. Eric, you finished strong. So you got 2 out of 4. But I have to say this was a bit hard. Maybe
that was a bit hard. I was pretty sure the other 2 were true, but I wasn't sure about the dates.
The thing is now, okay, why don't you tell our viewers and listeners your impressions while I checked whether Pearson was ambassador to... I'm sure I read it, but...
No. Okay. I'm sure you're right. It's
just that if you are right and I'm wrong and we publish this, I look like a fool. People are going to scream at me. What's his name? Lester. That's what I remember when my class at McGill in Canadian politics, that was an elective for me, and I was in physics, of course. And the lecturer kept saying Mike Pearson. I was like, who the hell is Mike Pearson? And how did you go from Lester to Mike? Anyway, so I'm going to check here. Ambassador to the United States, in office July 44 to September 46. Appointed by Mackenzie King. So
that sounds fine. That sounds fine. All right.
That was tough. Sorry, Eric.
I'm gonna put that more on the bronze than on the shame. I think that was more of a bronze performance. So
you recovered. I agree.
That was a tough one. All right. Thank you, Philippe. Number of the week. Would you like to go first?
Yeah, I had it right here. My number of the week is 40%. It's from the Abacus poll released on Sunday. So far, Mark Carney has lived up to expectations I had for him when he became Prime Minister. It's 40% of Canadians who agree with that statement. 41% say he has done less as Prime Minister than I expected he would. So a statistical tie between the two. While you could look at this and say, oh, this is lukewarm, it's not a great result for the Prime Minister, it's actually 40-40. So far, this is... I want to see Abacus do a tracking of this. Because it's not the numbers themselves that are most interesting, it's the tracking. Mr. Carney goes to Washington today. He's going to Washington. Well, he's already in Washington. He's going to meet with Trump and the U.S. administration. We expect nothing will come out of it yet, but it's an ongoing...
That's what's been suggested.
But it's also the long game. You know, you can't have a negotiation with someone who is bad faith negotiator, even if you're a great negotiator, right? But this will be interesting to follow, to track these numbers from Abacus, because I find that Mark Carney has won because people expected a lot of him. The Liberals would be nowhere without him today. So that's my number. What about you, Eric?
Well, I just want to point out we're recording this before that meeting, and you're probably listening to this after the meeting. So who knows what happened.
Right.
Hopefully it wasn't Zelensky. Okay, let's. My number of the week will be 21. 21 is the number of seats up for grabs in Yukon. Yes, the Yukon is starting its territorial election. So just wanted to point that out, that we have yet another election happening across the country. We also have a writ drop that took place in Nunavut. So we'll just watch to see what happens in Yukon. It was a literal tie in the last election. 8 seats for the Liberals, 8 seats for the conservative-leaning Yukon Party. And the Liberals were able to survive with a confidence and supply agreement with the NDP. That lasted the full 4 years, and now they're on their third premier since that last election, Mike Pemberton. So the Liberals seem to be in some trouble because they only have one incumbent on the ballot. All the other ones are not running for re-election. So we'll see what happens in Yukon. Over under on the polls in Yukon versus the numbers we'll have in Newfoundland and Labrador. Will we have more numbers in Yukon than we will from the Newfoundland and Labrador? We'll see. Anyway, just wanted to mark that vote. All right, well, that'll be it for this week, Philippe. And thanks very much, as always. And if you want to support our work, you can go to thenumberspod.ca. You get ad-free and early access to all the videos. We did a pretty fun episode last week. Contrarian hot takes.
That was hell. That was tough.
People seem to like it within the Discord, so we'll probably do it again. So if you want to listen to that, you can go to thenumberspod.ca. And Philippe, I think we're back later this week with an episode of Les Chiffres. And apart from that, I'll speak to you in a week. So, and also, if I should just enjoy the long weekend for those for the Thanksgiving long weekend coming up.
Also, the NHL starts. Finally, my soap opera is starting. So good hockey season to everybody.
Are they making the playoffs?
The Habs?
Yeah.
Oh yeah, they'll come. They'll be up there with probably Tampa and Florida for the division, and the Leafs won't make the playoffs. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Merci beaucoup, Eric. Merci beaucoup tout le monde. Have a great week.